Here we're going to have a look at the pullover. Great exercise, traditionally performed with a dumbbell, sometimes a straight bar. We love the exercise, but it's quite awkward for many different body types, and it carries with it a bit of inherent risk to the neck and shoulder girdle and so forth. But without belaboring the point about the exercise itself, let's get into an example of a sequence we find very effective. So here we have the old-fashioned dumbbell move, doing the pullover, but what I'm doing is I'm warming the client into it by taking quite a heavy dumbbell, but spending most of the time in the upper easy range. Only every third rep is going all the way down. This allows the person to get a feel for the movement without sort of rejecting the proper technique by always going into the stretch. Only every third rep goes into the stretch. So he gets a chance to work the movement in the easy range, but with enough weight that he can actually feel it where it needs to be felt, the lats, and to a lesser degree the chest, and keep himself from overusing the triceps. Keep himself from binding up the shoulder girdle and over-tensing the neck and upper back. This is sort of like a practice run. Basically, 2 top half easy reps, then it's followed by a full rep. Now I just had him fine-tune those top half reps there, but the point is simple. Build up some fatigue and practice the movement with a heavy weight, then switch over to a light weight and reverse the process, because you will need to know how to work the stretch range properly. But it's safer and more effective to do so with a little bit of fatigue built up and then using a light weight and focusing on the bottom range. So we've reversed the process. He performs 2 bottom half range movements followed by 1 full movement. So he's spending extra time in the tough range, the opposite of the first sequence where we spent extra time in the easy range, but he's spending this extra time in the tough range with a light weight. Again, this gives you the ability to not overuse the triceps, not over-tense the neck, not bind up the shoulder girdle, and also not overutilize the abdominals. When an exercise is performed wrong, because you try to jump into the work set too early, there's a tendency to inhibit proper muscular function and just find a way to get through the movement. So while it's not really a warm-up in the sense of warming up the muscles, it's more warming up the nervous system, warming up your attitude and your brain towards using the muscles properly and targeting the big torso muscles, which is the real genius of a pullover move. So once you're warmed up, then you go back to the heavy weight. This time no full reps. You've got some pre-fatigue, so you don't need to go deep to really feel this movement. And because it's a heavy weight, you're not getting a big rest as you come to the top like you normally would. So if you went to full range with a dumbbell, not only would you not be able to use a dumbbell this heavy, but you'd get a huge break as you came into the top range of motion, and you'd only have effectively worked the stretch range. And the stretch range is the range where most people tend to cheat too much. So you begin the work set by working just this top half range. You'd be surprised just how much this feels like a full pullover, even though you're only going halfway down. If you want to work it hard, I'm watching for the signs here that he's building up some real fatigue. And then before he goes too far, we switch back to the light weight, and now we do allow him to go down into the stretch. Now with all this fatigue and feel built up, the stretch portion, even with this very light weight, feels very effective. It feels very heavy. No rest break, no coming to the top at all. But he has worked the top range, and he has built up the coordination, the proper technique to target the proper muscles. So now while working this bottom range with light weight, which is both very safe and effective for keeping the neck and shoulders and triceps out of it, he's still getting a really good effect. We push these sets pretty hard, but not to complete failure. You don't want to go to complete failure on a pullover all the time because you can end up straining yourself. Now let's compare this to the genius futuristic breakthroughs of the Nautilus, I like to say. Here's a Nautilus machine pullover. Very simple to use. Not that there's anything wrong with using free weights, but you have to admire the fact that in a pullover machine, the same movement is much smoother, much simpler, meaning you can go much harder, much more effectively without nearly as much need to coordinate, balance, and fuss about. With the bar there, it's just to keep my hands from allowing my elbows not to slip off the pads. Here, you can see it here. My elbows are really, and my upper arm, are really allowed to press against the weight and really get the full load onto my torso. The irony being that as old as the dumbbell pullover move is, the actual machine pullover is quite old as well. Many, many decades old. Harkening back to 70s and early 80s. Very effective movement for men and women. All you have to do is take a look at some of the mechanisms up close here to see why a machine pullover is actually a really smart choice. There's a foot mechanism to get the weight into place, so you're not risking overstretching yourself at the beginning or end of a set. This can be controlled by the foot. There's counterweights. Again, I mentioned before, there's a seat belt. You're sitting upright instead of laying down. It's a little easier on your blood pressure. And the real genius in Nautilus is the variable cam here. That camming mechanism on the inside of the sprocket allows you to vary how the weight feels to your muscles a little more in line with proper joint function and no real rest bottom to top. That's because of the shell-shaped design of the Nautilus. Anyway, maybe revisit the pullover, try our sequence, and let us know how it goes.